On today's episode of Watch JR Go, it's time for the all-important question. Do we fix this Nissan Frontier, or do we kick it on down the road? What is going on, guys? I am Watch JR Go, and like I said before, today is the day where we're going to dig into this Nissan Frontier and decide what it's going to cost to fix it and whether it's worth fixing. So we're going to jump right into troubleshooting this thing. I'm going to show you guys everything that I found that was wrong with it, and we're going to go look up parts costs on all of that. We are waiting on a few things, like a quote for the windshield. I assume the windshield will be about $120 installed. It is an old dumb windshield, as you guys know. The newer cars with rain sensors and all that fun stuff, those windshields have started to get kind of expensive, but these old straight glass windshields, they are sure cheap. Unbelievably cheap in a lot of cases. Another fun thing with the Frontier is we need to hop in here and figure out why the radio doesn't turn on, and from there we'll decide whether we have to just completely replace that. So it's one of those things where you kind of have to troubleshoot that first before you can go figure out parts costs, because we may not need to replace it at all. Check out the old school e-brake in this. This is one of those ones that you pull, and it actually has a trigger to release it, it looks like. Okay, no, you still turn it, just like all the old ones. Yep, give it a little twist, and that's how you release it. So if you haven't seen one of those before, it's a kind of a different e-brake compared to everything we're used to these days. I probably need to get right here, so let's go ahead and do that. Put this thing in gear so I've got some room to work, and I don't know where the screws are for this, but I'm gonna guess usually they're hiding. So we'll just pull the ashtray, and there's one screw right there. Let's go get some lights so we can actually see what I'm working on. There was only one screw holding in the bezel here for the radio, so that came right out, and two more screws holding the radio in. Look at that, the pocket's not even installed. The pocket doesn't even have a mounting point. That is absolutely the wrong install kit for this car. And this looks like a bad sign. There are unplugged connectors everywhere under here. What on earth is going on? Pulled out the 4 screws holding the radio into the dash on this thing. So now it should just kind of fall out of here. And I'm just gonna go get the meter and figure out why there's no power. I'm assuming there's no power. It could be an actual problem with the head unit. I found the rarest problem at all. The fuse to the head unit was blown. If you guys can see that right there at the top of that fuse, it is absolutely gone. So I'll grab a new tin, slap it in there, and maybe we've got that part fixed already. I think this connector here with just the 2 wires going to it is probably the steering wheel controls for the factory head unit, and they didn't buy an interface. And also this head unit isn't even provisioned. Yeah, there's no steering wheel inputs on this old school head unit. So unfortunately, that's why the steering wheel controls don't work anymore. I don't want to spend $100 and something on the SWC interface, so we're just gonna fix this and put it back. This thing's been playing now for 5 minutes, and I've had it turned basically all the way up the whole time, seeing if the amp would blow the fuse again, and it's working well so far, so I think we're gonna go ahead and call that good. I'm actually playing some music that I've got a license for in here, so we can turn it up and let's do it. It doesn't sound great. Needs speakers for sure. For what appears to be factory speakers all the way around, this thing works pretty well. I'll put the center console back together and move on to tackling all these codes. Well, we can chalk that one up to a win. We got ourselves a free one there. That fuse was definitely free. It probably came out of a parts car. And now it's time to diagnose some of these lights on the dash here. So I've got the Autel hooked up, and while we're scanning that there, we'll just go ahead and kick that thing into auto scan. We can talk about the L we just took. The quote just came back from Blue Collar Collision and Glass. And this glass isn't cheap. It should have been, but it is $225 installed. So that's actually quite a bit more than I would expect on a really old vehicle that has no features. No rain sensor, no ambient lighting sensor, no HVAC load sensor. It has nothing. But apparently it's expensive glass. Doesn't make much sense, but we'll get this thing scanned here. Should be done in just a minute, and we'll figure out what we got to work on next. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and jack the truck up. Well, I already did that. And we've got the Autel out here, and of course it was showing those errors for the wheel speed sensors, front, left hand, and right hand. They both show short. So I'm gonna give them a spin here and see if we're actually getting any feedback. Everything else seems like it works. I bet we can actually turn the ABS pump on and off from here. So I'd hate to replace the ABS unit, but I have a good idea that's what's actually wrong. So we'll just give the wheel a good spin. And we are seeing nothing, 0 kilometers. Unfortunately, we got the same result over on the passenger side. I spun the wheel as fast as I could and it was still at 0 kilometers. So let's check the ABS pump. That sure seemed like it worked, but only for a half second. Now that seems kind of odd there. You'd think if I hit ABS pump on, it would actually run instead of just jogging it. But it's definitely just giving it like a little bump and shutting right back off. And it doesn't even turn off on the scan tool, it just waits. If you're working on one of these Frontiers at home, it appears that the 4-channel trucks have a single-channel ABS sensor with just 1 sensor on the pumpkin. And these have a triple-channel ABS system with, of course, front, right, left, and the rear sensor there. Now, I just unplugged one of them, just the driver's side one here, and cleared the codes on the ABS module, scanned it again, and apparently it says no fault codes detected. I don't know if that's true. Let's jump inside and see if the ABS light is shut off. It should definitely have an open sensor right now. Well, look at that. We might actually have bad wheel speed sensors. I kind of doubt it still, but what I'm going to do is jack it back up and we'll hook the oscilloscope up to one of them and we'll see if we're getting a waveform out of that thing. But for some reason, sensor open detects properly and sensor short is actually a low voltage condition. So it's possible that it has bad sensors, but they look like they've been recently replaced, which definitely is what led me to believe that it's a bad ABS module. Let's keep going. Look, I don't know how we would have 2 bad ABS sensors at one time in this truck, but you can see the meter is hooked on there. I stuck some test leads down inside the connector, and it should be reading somewhere between 1.2 and 1.9 kiloohms. That's the spec for these sensors, and instead we just have over limit or open circuit there. So it is actually coming back as a dead sensor. Unbelievable. We'll also go ahead and add 2 dead sensors to the total and keep right on troubleshooting here. And when we replace them, I'll try one and then the other one to make sure we're actually getting those fixed, because it's quite a bit of work to go ahead and replace them and then find out you still have a bad ABS computer. It seems like it's reporting all the statuses correctly though, so it may be good. Let's keep going. Now we know roughly what ABS is going to cost to fix. We're moving on to the other codes we had. Of course, we had that knock sensor error. The knock sensor is buried on these engines way down here in the valley, and honestly, there's a good chance that it just was knocking. It may not be a bad knock sensor. If you remember when this truck showed up the first time, the distributor screws were fully backed out, and there's a chance that the distributor just wasn't seated right and it was missing or something like that. And then after I tightened down the screws to hold down the cap, maybe it's okay. So we're gonna go ahead and test drive it and see if that comes back. There was also the throttle position code as well, which could also be ignition timing related. You need to make sure all the base timing is set and reliable before you go chasing down all these sensor issues. So we're on to the last one here, which is this messy power steering system. So you can see that somebody's been moving that clamp around down there. They've had it loose, moved it up, done a whole bunch of fun stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide that back down just a hair in case they don't have it over the formed part of the connector. They might be clamping down ahead of that, which would make it easy to leak. So I'm just gonna back that clamp off a bit, move it down about a 1/4 inch and tighten it back down. And then we'll spray this down with brake clean to see if we got that leak fixed. Hopefully we do. So that's probably the best way to start troubleshooting this. Power steering fluid has truly gone everywhere in this engine bay. What a mess. I soaked everything down with brake clean. You can tell all the hoses and the reservoir, everything's super clean now. Even our fitting down there on the bottom of the power steering pump. This is of course just the reservoir and the feed into the pump. The high pressure lines actually look like they're doing just great. There's even a sensor on the high pressure line to tell you if the pump's working. So I think we're good to go. Let's go ahead and stick the battery back in this and take it out for a test drive. We'll see if the check engine light comes back, and we'll see if our leak comes back. And if all of that's good, well, we know what's wrong with it, and it actually won't be nearly as hard to fix as I expected. This car has one more terrible issue. Every time you get in, you can't put your seatbelt on because the stopper that belongs right here for the seatbelt is absolutely missing. And the seatbelt's twisted because it seems like somebody took the pillar apart and then flipped the bolts to hold this thing on here. So it's 180 degrees out of phase there, and I need to try to fix it. And yes, I did just try feeding it through here and flipping it, and it is absolutely not working. All right, let's go drive this thing and see what happens with our check engine light, see if it comes back, and also see if our power steering leak gets worse or gets better. One of the two is gonna happen. We do have both sensors hooked back up to the ABS unit, and of course there is the 00, and they are still showing that code that they are faulty. So 16 kilometers an hour out of the rear. It's funny, from what I see in the diagram, there's only one sensor in the rear, but it sees it as two different ones. It must just duplicate the input there. Now I'm gonna go ahead and flip over to the ECU. We'll do a full drive cycle and cycle the key and everything, trying to make this check engine light come back, and we'll see what happens. I think we've ruled out the throttle position sensor as actually being an issue. I'm graphing TPS versus the ignition timing here, and everything seems to be working wonderfully. No check engine light, no flashing check engine light for misfires or anything like that. And you guys can check out the graph right here. Blue line's TPS, green line's ignition timing. You can see this thing's just cruising. It's got 44 degrees in it in cruise. And if I get on it, you can see the throttle's movement versus the timing. Everything seems to be doing exactly what it needs to do. Throttle's at 0 right there, 0.54 volts. And we'll get right back on it in just a moment here. You can see that we'll be back at about 1 volt there. That's maybe 10% throttle, 20% throttle. It seems like everything works perfectly. We talked about how this supercharger doesn't add a lot of power to this platform, and that's true, it doesn't. But what it does do is when you get on the throttle, the power is there, like instantly, I have to say. Like, it just downshifted and went. That delay between pedal and acceleration in lots of other cars is so much worse than this. So I gotta give it props there. I'll show you guys here. We'll come to a complete stop and I'll just get on the throttle. And I think it's actually pretty magical for this old truck. In the first video, we did talk about how it makes 230 horsepower, which honestly, kind of a lot for a truck that weighs this much. Here we go. Not bad, right? Like, it's not a new truck, but it does kind of fly to the speed limit. And there's no weight in the bed, so it never has any traction. Now, after our test drive, I don't see any fresh fluid on that return hose at all. I know it's really hard to make it focus on that, or on that fitting down below. It looks like it's completely clean, which is a good sign so far. But then there's also a clamp on the back of this reservoir that I tightened down, and it looks like there's still maybe a drip around there. I did wipe that off a hair, but obviously it's really hard to see any of this stuff. But it's not actively dripping. So that's a big bonus. Before, it would just drip on the floor after a couple of seconds, and at the moment, these drips look like they came from earlier. And then that new one there is engine oil. Just a little drip of engine oil. Another fun thing I noticed in here is all of the lines, like this solenoid here that I'm pointing at with those 2 lines on it, that's the supercharger bypass solenoid. It controls when it needs to open the bypass so that you're not shoving boost into the engine off throttle. These lines are all trash. Like, you can see the rubber's just falling apart right there. The other one that goes actually to the bypass valve looks even worse. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace those. I've got some bulk vacuum tubing here. We'll just snip those off and replace at least those 2 lines, especially right there. It looks like it's kind of starting to fail. And the connection point down there under the throttle body also looks like it's starting to fail. So those should probably be replaced. It's the last thing you want to do is run around with no boost. That was some nasty garbage, and it probably wouldn't have lasted much longer at all. This one here just ripped right in half when I tried to take it off. I think we can chalk another one up in the W column with that power steering. It looks like the leak should be fixed, if not slowed down dramatically, because I mean, you guys saw there was a puddle before, and that may be solved. So we'll let it sit overnight. Of course, I'm rescanning the truck right now. We still need both ABS sensors. Those are $150 each, $143 or something like that. So we'll call it $300 for those. Unfortunately, $225 for the windshield. So there's $525. I haven't seen a knock sensor code again. I haven't seen another throttle position sensor code. So it looks like we're clear on those if we needed them. The throttle position sensor is a bit expensive. Knock sensor, only $80. Radio, we fixed that for free. We made sure there was no issues with the supercharger control by replacing that hose. We can call that one free. And no codes from the engine so far. No fault, there we go. And 2 ABS faults, no other faults on the vehicle. So that is pretty awesome. It looks like we'll have this truck sorted with no lights on the dash for just $500. And my mom did drive it and wants me to check the alignment. Of course, we'll just run over to Johnny's and put it on the rack to see what's going on with that. I think the alignment's pretty solid. It drives straight. You can let go of the wheel, go straight down the road. So I don't see any real issue there. This seems like a much better truck than I expected. It was still definitely a very rough flip, and it could have cost so much more to fix. And if that was the case, I think we'd have to get rid of it. But for 500 bucks, I think you just drive the truck. So let's get to it. In the next episode, we're gonna fix all of this stuff. I gotta order those ABS sensors, and we'll continue sorting this thing out. I soaked everything underneath this truck with brake clean, tons of it, as you can see, so that we can see if there are any more drips from that overnight. And it looks like that sway bar bushing there, right out here on the end, the oil has destroyed that, so I gotta grab one of those as well, if it'll. There you go, you can see all the rubber sticking out there. So that one over there looks really good. This one over here looks really bad. So hopefully that's cheap. I'm gonna add like 20 bucks to the total there, so $545. Hey, I found the exhaust leak too. The entire exhaust canister is blown out there at the seam. You can see it kind of rusted away. So that would explain why it sounds a little bit raspy. Just time for a Flowmaster 40 series or something, but I think we're gonna leave that part alone. Well, there you have it, the 2001 Nissan Frontier, everything that's wrong with it and what it's gonna cost to fix. I'm pretty excited that we can fix the entire thing for $545. So, that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to head on over to shop.watchjrgo.com for cool shirts, just like the one I'm wearing under this. And please, like, share, subscribe, do whatever you wanna do, and I will talk to you next time. All right, we're here at O'Reilly's to buy that seatbelt stop and those wheel speed sensors. Let's make this magic happen, and then we'll be good to go tomorrow. Somebody just came to O'Reilly's and bought them out of the seatbelt stoppers. I thought I was gonna be done with that tonight, but they are on the way. They'll be here tomorrow morning, and that's when we'll get this done.